this opportunity that we have as a community to help shape the trajectory of how AI and adjacent advanced technologies are implemented around the world. Scott, thank you very much. All right. Hey, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to Eagle Dream for convening this fantastic group of people and for giving all of us a stage to share some of our work and our visions for what is coming up for our community and our industries and everything. And I'm going to try to, there we go. Okay, so I'm coming at you as the founder of Pittsburgh AI, as the innovation director at Ascender, and I've got a few other hats that I'll share in a little bit. But this talk, given the rapid pace that we want to go through, I'm not going to go through deeply technical or a lot of different case studies. We could be here for hours on that, and frankly, we've got more qualified people coming up afterwards to tell you more specifics about how AI is transforming different fields. Instead, what I'm going to challenge you with is more of a bold statement or a push for recognizing the gravity and the urgency of how these technologies are going to change our economy, society, and culture. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's the sense that Pittsburgh is on the front lines of the fourth industrial revolution, and that we all, including everyone in and out of this room, we all have a role to play. Now, I think I could see some heads nodding. I could probably imagine some gears turning. Is there anyone in the audience who sees this statement and just knows exactly what I mean and agrees or something? Okay, so a good number of hands. Is there anyone who's, the main thought is wait a second, fourth industrial revolution? I thought there was just one. At least that's what, Mrs. Kane in, the fourth grade taught me. Is anyone unfamiliar with this term, fourth industrial revolution? Fantastic. Okay, cool. So, brief overview. The fourth industrial revolution is a concept that was coined and popularized by Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum a couple years ago. It essentially posits that human civilization has gone through a series of industrial revolutions, starting with steam power and initial machination of a lot of heavy processes and machinery, moving into electricity and the assembly line, mass production from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. The third industrial revolution was the revolution of computation and automation, as computers and electronic devices started pervading all sorts of periods, all sorts of segments of our lives and industry and business, creating the world that we see today. The fourth industrial revolution, which we're in the initial phases of, is built around what they call cyber-physical systems. So when smart technology, sensors and edge computation capabilities and just super powerful computers are everywhere around us, in our devices, in our clothes, in the atmosphere, in our infrastructure, even inside our bodies, and communicating with each other to shape our perceptions of the environment and the way that our environment optimizes and personalizes our experiences. That's what the fourth industrial revolution looks like, this seamless integration of our physical, digital, and biological systems. And if that sounds sci-fi to you, if it sounds like it's far away, I assure you it is not. It's here right now, and Pittsburgh is actually one of those cities that is driving a lot of the research and the innovation around building these things. But it comes with, there's just as much for us to gain as there is to lose. And before I go any further, Click. Before I go any further, I want to level set a bit more and ask a bit about you and AI. So can I get a show of hands? Who in the room works professionally in an AI or adjacent field? So it could be in you could be in computer science, data science, working on different kinds of robotics, other automated processes, those kinds of things. Okay, cool. And who is courageous enough to admit that you know very little about AI? You might not know the difference between machine learning and deep learning and recursive neural networks and stochastic gradient descent and all of those kinds of things. Okay, cool, perfect. And yeah, you're not alone. You're in great company either way. Who feels generally optimistic about the prospects of what AI's benefits can bring to our society or to business? All right, optimism, good. And then who is more concerned or anxious, even fearful about the risks and implications of AI, more so than how they feel about the positives? All right, good. So more optimists, I think, in the room than pessimists, and that's all good. To be honest, my position is kind of a cop-out. I'm in between on both. I don't consider myself to be an expert. Really, I've only been operating in the space for about 2.5 to 3 years, where I've been intentionally chasing after and learning as much as I can about the cross-sector AI ecosystem. I spend about 20 hours a week trying to learn different things, talking to experts, all of that kind of stuff. But the more I learn, the more I realize that I still don't know. At the same time, there's so much that's been available to me to learn and to process that I've cleared up a lot of my internal confusion, and I've been trying to figure out what pragmatically we need to do right now with the data that we have about what's coming in the immediate future and move us towards a more positive, optimistic outlook. But the reality is right now, most of the world is very poorly prepared and very behind in terms of putting structures in place to ensure that people's lives and livelihoods aren't put at risk with the fast coming waves of automation, job loss, and even social and political discord that can be sown with poorly crafted or insecure systems. So I've had this privilege of being in Pittsburgh during a time when a lot of these kinds of structures and interests have come to play throughout the world. I started paying attention in 2016 while we were preparing for our Thrival Festival during that time. And it became really clear that, hey, there's something about AI and how deeply and widely it pervades every industry vertical or kind of horizontal of applications. Maybe we should pay a bit more attention to this. And lo and behold, Uber launches its autonomous vehicles fleet here in September 2016. The UN starts its AI for Good initiatives. The Partnership on AI is created by the seven of the largest tech companies in the world. And since that time, there's been this cascade of more and more organizations around the world waking up to, again, the urgency and the gravity of the implications as well as the opportunities that this provides. And so somehow, I've ended up being able to wear a variety of hats. If anyone would like one or more of these hats, I'm happy to give them to you. I'm kind of drowning in hats right now. But from a global level at the top, with some of the work that we're doing with the UN's AI for Good initiatives, with AI Commons, which is their global AI marketplace and ecosystem for solutions development, the X Prize Foundation, a leader in multi-million-dollar incentive competitions for moonshot technology development, City AI, global grassroots organization, and all of this kind of stuff. We've also got a growing environment of stakeholders here in Pittsburgh that are working on AI initiatives, including Pittsburgh AI, which I started a few months ago and has now gathered a community of more than a dozen ambassadors and hundreds of people who have come to our events and all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to leave this here. We can talk about that later, but I want to jump in. And this is the most that I'm going to talk about the kind of technical structure of AI. I find that far too many people have an overly mystified view of what AI entails. A lot of it's been driven by movies and pop culture and this and that kind of stuff. People who constantly say, oh no, I'm not smart enough, or I don't have the background or the degree or the capabilities to understand this stuff. And that's a disservice to each of you and to your communities at large. My firm belief is that everybody has a place in this conversation, not just an opportunity, but even a responsibility to understand more of how this actually works. Not just like Terminator, Skynet types of fear-mongering, but actually understanding the ultimately not all that complicated nuts and bolts of what AI entails. And so this is about as simple as I can make it. Or to say that, even simpler might be to say AI ultimately comes down to taking large data sets and finding patterns in them. That's mostly what it is. And if you want to go a bit further, you can talk about how it's a process of taking inputs, essentially different kinds of data, whether it's text, images, audio, video, that kind of stuff, creating models, algorithms or statistical methods. There's dozens of different ways to create software that will find patterns within that data set and then drive outputs, for the goals that you predetermine for the system. You might be looking for a suggestion on Netflix for what to watch next, or a decision for who's best equipped for to be employed or promoted within a company, a probability of how likely you are to enjoy a movie or to swipe right for someone on a dating app. And what's special about AI, or why people call this machine learning or deep learning, all of that kind of stuff, is this sense that every time you generate an output and a user, or there's some kind of feedback about whether that output was correct or not, whether you click and watch that Netflix show, or you decide to go to that restaurant, or you decide to go on a date with that person, all of that data that is generated comes back in and further informs and improves the model to get better outputs in the future. That's mostly the structure and promise. And of course, we could go much deeper than this. There are a lot more nuances, but hopefully that makes sense for now, because this is what lays the groundwork for thousands, if not tens of thousands, of AI companies and startups that are working around the world trying to corner markets and create competitive advantages for the work that they're doing. CB Insights publishes an annual AI 100 listing of companies. And I don't know if you can read it very well, but agriculture, auto, healthcare, government, finance, retail, media, real estate, legal, like all of these sectors are being quickly disrupted by people, again, trying to create those competitive advantages or better serve their customers. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see any Pittsburgh companies on here. The only one that I know of was Petuum, that was on the 2017 CB Insights AI 100 for core AI under an enterprise category. But if you only look at Pittsburgh local news, you would think that we're on the top of the world. That we are just leading all sorts of different segments because of all the accolades that we're getting and whatnot. And I think we're great, but we're not there yet. We're not competing on that kind of a level. We don't have the kind of oomph or urgency or hunger behind it to carve out this place on the list, but we can. And that's really part of this message that I'm trying to drive here, because again, the global AI ecosystem is moving fast. If you just look at the timeline over the last 2 years of cities and countries that have put out AI strategies or regulatory structures, public-private partnerships, and different kinds of things, it's dozens, if not more than 100 cities and countries around the world that have decided, hey, this is how we're going to approach AI as a community and as a system. My gold standard that I point to is Canada. Montreal and Toronto. Montreal on its own has received more than $1.5 billion from their federal government to specifically drive towards AI talent and entrepreneurial development throughout their ecosystem. They've rebranded themselves from this kind of arts and culture capital of Canada into the place where AI is being developed at the most advanced levels, but also the most ethically by virtue of the way that government, business, academia, their nonprofit and community segments are all engaged and working together in one direction. And we don't have $1.5 billion that we can drop here, but I'd like to venture to think that we can find ways with this abundance of resources that we do have to move the ball forward for us. And to not just jump foolhardy, in a foolhardy way into this space, to not say, okay, every one of our companies just needs to deploy AI as fast as possible. That's not the way to go. I was telling some people earlier, about 99% of problems that people are trying to apply AI towards right now don't even need AI. They just need better data collection methods and improved ways of driving customer outcomes, or you're just doing basic data science kind of stuff rather than creating agents or more advanced things than that. Because when you start putting AI in the middle of a bunch of things, if you start handing over decisions and processes, automating everything, and if you do so with the willingness to move fast and break things, there's a lot at stake. Just look at the kind of timeline of scandals and challenges that happened between 2017 and 2018. This is an infographic that I reference pretty often from AI Now. And just between Cambridge Analytica and the things around Google's Project Maven, the Uber crash in Tempe, Arizona, and the breaches and other things that have come out. Clearly, a lot of them have survived these bumps along the way. But how soon will it be before something fatal, in the multiple senses of the word, come through? The balance and the integrity of our society and civilization hangs in the mix of what decisions we make, essentially from now and into the next decade, around whose interests we are working to serve. Whose lives and livelihoods are we serving to protect, to make indisputable? And there's dozens of these organizations around the world that are frantically or putting all of their effort into answering these core questions because we don't know how mass automation and these kinds of technologies are going to end up impacting society at large, but we know that there's a lot of risks involved, whether it's around unemployment, when we know that 47% of current jobs in the US are at risk of automation by 2030. By 2030, it's an estimated 400 to 800 million jobs worldwide that are going to be automated, largely in retail, manufacturing, truck driving, even white-collar administrative work. What are we going to do with all of those humans whose lives and livelihoods we care about? How is inequality going to be addressed? Will wealth be shared by all of these mega tech corporations, or will there be a safety net for people whose entire lineage of work is made unimportant or inconsequential? Are we going to deal with bias in algorithms, which is one of the biggest issues when you have inherently biased data sets that are driving decisions around hiring or loan rates or predictive policing? How are we going to ensure that people receive fair treatment? And how are we going to preempt that by creating more inclusive cultures and communities? How are we going to maintain security and accountability for people and ultimately preserve our dignity and humanity as people and as a broader society? These aren't new questions. They're things that have been asked time and time again when automation and the negative ramifications from rapid technological development happened, including here in Pittsburgh. Everything from the Homestead strike in 1892 to having hell with the lid off here in Pittsburgh, where you had the worst air pollution out of anywhere in the 1940s and 1950s. Pittsburgh is this ideal place to build these solutions because we've been there before. We've struggled and gone to the brink of extinction and collapse, but survived and found ways to reinvent ourselves time and time again. And this city is actually recognized worldwide for those innovative strategies that were put in place. Renaissance 1 and Renaissance 2, 1944, when the Allegheny Conference and a dozen other organizations were created to clean up the air and the water. The 1980s, when after the steel industry collapsed, the kinds of public works projects and infrastructure development, business and economic development was put in place. We helped build the playbook for other cities that have tried to pull themselves back up and reinvent themselves, and we can do so again. We've got everything we need to do things right this time around and to step up as a global leader to help write that playbook again. Ultimately, though, we need to make sure that our values are in place, that we're not chasing after technology in a foolish way, but really observing the kinds of human systems and values that underlie the ethics of the decisions that we make. Ultimately, the path to AI for good comes from answering that question of what makes us human. So my call to action for you is to pursue as much awareness and information and engagement from your own end and for your communities as you possibly can. Come together in the way that Pittsburgh has done so well time and time again, because the stakes are higher than ever. And like I mentioned before, there's just as much that we have to gain as we have to lose. And so feel free to pull out your phones and take a photo here, because there's a few things that you can do. As I mentioned, I started Pittsburgh AI recently. It's meant to be a community-driven and community-owned platform for people from across the AI ecosystem to engage with each other and to bring into the ecosystem things that they want to see for themselves, organizations, businesses, communities, et cetera. We've got a newsletter that goes out every week or two, as well as an actual launch party on June 21st. If you also want to engage with the Allegheny Conference and help shape our region's next 75 years, I highly encourage you to come join us at the Our Next 75 Summit on June 27th and follow along there. There's a lot of opportunities for people to bring bold visions and find structures and opportunities to bring them to fruition. Number 3 is a 78-page PDF that has pretty much all the, it's not a reading, it's a bibliography of links of books that you can read that can last you the next 10,000 hours. You can also pursue a career in AI policy by following that link. And then finally, just chase after this in the way that speaks and resonates most to your interests and your motivations, and talk to others about it, because so much of this is still being shaped, so much of this path is still uncharted, and I hope you join me and the rest of this emerging global ecosystem to make sure that we do this right, to make sure that we have Pittsburgh on this forefront, and to make sure that we all stay human in the process. Thank you.